Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. This episode is brought to you by LMNT Electrolytes. This month, we're switching it up with an exclusive offer that's only for VIP LMNT partners, including Carnivore Cast listeners. You can now receive this free sample pack along with any regular purchase when you use my custom link, which is provided in the show notes or my Instagram link in bio. That's drinklmnt.com/carnivorecast, all one word. And as I said, I'll include the link in the show notes. LMNT Electrolytes are convenient, evidence-based, and delicious. And get yours today to help support the show. Thank you. Dr. Scott Solomons, at Dr. Scott Solomons on Instagram, is a dentist since 1989 and a functional medicine practitioner. He combines dentistry, nutrition, and general health concepts to enable his patients to heal better and stay healthy longer. He received his DDS from Colombia University and is a member of several dental associations, as well as Paleo and primal societies such as the Ancestral Health Society and the Weston A Price Foundation. He is also on the medical advisory board of the Kresser Institute for Functional and Evolutionary Medicine. Welcome to the show, Dr. Scott.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah. The pleasure is mine. So I'd love to hear, how you went from dentistry to taking a deeper dive into nutrition and ways of eating, and how that's evolved for you.
Yeah, probably a similar story to what a lot of folks have. You do enough to just survive the rigors of dental school and setting up practice and all that stuff. And, you realize once you get going that maybe there's a little bit more to it than what they taught you, at least the way I look at things, if it was all about brushing, flossing, fluoride, and having 2 cleanings a year, shouldn't we all be doing just fine in the cavity and gum disease department? Sadly, not so. So, you take a little bit of a deeper dive into things and you realize that, well, hey, maybe there's more to it than this. Maybe it has something to do with cigarette smoking and eating a poor diet. This all happened along with my health going downhill steadily for years. And then, when I look back, I actually realized that I guess I was considered a normal, healthy person, but not really. I was a little tiny baby, had constant earaches, had my tonsils and adenoids out. I don't think any of this is normal, but it was deemed as being normal. Like everybody else went through that. My teeth became crowded and crooked. I had acne, had my appendix removed. Then in dental school, I developed chronic sinus problems. It was just like the wheels were falling off. Every year was getting worse than the next. And they'd have you believe that, the human body is just poorly designed and, you're going to get old and fall apart. And thank God there's pharmaceuticals and surgery. So, I was kind of struggling. I'd go to a doctor feeling terribly, but I never looked very sick, and I'm kind of a happy person. So they couldn't find anything wrong with me necessarily. But then they'd always have a pill. But there's nothing wrong with me, but here's a pill. So I ended up seeing a functional medicine practitioner, and it's a funny thing. I think she's actually a vegan, believe it or not. And she gave me a packet of materials at the first visit, and I went home and read them, and I found out about this thing called the Paleo diet. And lo and behold, it resonated with me because in college I did a lot of anthropology stuff. I was always of the opinion we're cavemen and women genetically, but we're just in the wrong environment in the wrong time. So I immediately adopted it. And guess what? Within the week, I was already better. She hadn't even taken a blood test or a urine test or anything.
Wow.
We ended up doing all that stuff. And I found out I had a gluten allergy. So that was really the basis of it. I probably had a bagel for breakfast. The food pyramid. Aren't you supposed to eat the food pyramid? Bagel for breakfast, maybe a nice little Subway or a pizza for lunch, a little pasta for dinner. It was killing me. It was tanking my immune system. Also found out I was toxic with mercury, and I had never placed a mercury silver filling. It turns out they don't tell you this in dental school. When you drill the stuff out, it's not an alloy. It's actually an amalgam. So it separates back out into the silver and the mercury, and the mercury vaporizes. So I was breathing in mercury vapor for years, and I had toxic levels of it. So that led me down the path of what else is dentistry doing that is not so great. So started looking on the internet for, different information. At first, there really wasn't anything on the paleo diet, so I gave up. And I was definitely telling people about it, giving up processed foods and things like that, my patients. And every once in a while, somebody would give me a big hug and say, you saved my life. I'm not on any medicine. And one time somebody did that and said, oh, have you heard about Mark's Daily Apple and Rob? I'm like, what? And, so in the years that I sort of gave up looking for anybody in this community, one sprang up. So then, of course, I was devouring all sorts of information, and it came upon Kresser, and I knew I definitely wanted to do some kind of functional medicine. And it was in those days, Rob Wolf was trying to develop a program along with Chris Kresser. Chris Kresser developed his first, and it was really great. I was in the first, the inaugural class, and it just, incorporated that whole ancestral thing in with the dental thing. And it's just been a home run.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think I remember back in 2016, I went to Paleo FX, and I think it was around then that Chris Kresser was launching it. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he had a whole booth talking about it, and a bunch of people were asking.
Yeah.
I think I made friends with someone who's medical school, and he was like asking Chris a bunch of questions, trying to get involved. But it's really cool to see how it's evolved.
Yeah, and it's great that word is getting out there that there are other things you can do besides taking pills. So it's good. People are waking up.
Yeah, and how has you mentioned like feeling better from day one, but how has how has your diet changed over the years?
Yeah, so that's
what other effects have you experienced?
Yeah, well, first of all, when I started, it was a long time. I mean, in terms of the paleo diet, that sort of thing, it was over 15 years ago. I can't even remember the specific year, but it's at least 15. I think it's more. And really, the only thing out there that I could find was Lauren Cordain's book, The Paleo Diet. And he later amended that book. He was afraid, and maybe I think he got pressure from the publishers to say that you should eat fatty meat. So it was a lean meat diet. But if you're not careful and you go paleo, you accidentally can go low carb. And obviously protein is not really a good energy source, as you well know. So basically protein and vegetables, and you're giving yourself rabbit starvation. I wrote about my bout with rabbit starvation. I'd get a little nervous. I'd get in the car, and if I didn't have a bag of nuts or something, I knew, by an hour or two later, I'd be kind of ravenous. Then I met Nora Gagaudis. She goes to a lot of different conferences.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she had that book, Primal Body, Primal Mind, and it was all about fatty meats. And, Sally Fallon Morell, the Weston A Price Foundation, she speaks of forums that they used to be on with Lauren Cordain. And he was all about the fatty meat, but he just couldn't pull the trigger on that initial book for fear of it would be canned, and maybe he wouldn't even be able to have it published. So, after I read Nora's book, and I've, thanked her personally for it, up the animal fat. And then it was really a home run. Incidentally, this whole keto thing cropped up around, that sort of time, I guess. I never was real interested in it. I never had to lose weight or anything like that. But lo and behold, I always tell patients to maybe use MyFitnessPal or a chronometer or something like that, just maybe for a week or two to see, where they're netting out with their diets and their nutrients. But I had never done it. So I said, I probably should do that, eh? And I was logging everything, and son of a gun, I was ultra low carb. I've never checked my ketones, but
Low fat.
clearly I wasn't. So I was on the keto diet.
Yeah.
And then I think I saw Sean Baker talk at Paleo FX probably before the pandemic. And I thought, carnivore diet. That sounds really interesting. So I think I dove in and did the research, and I thought, wow, what do I have to lose? Because the one thing I regret about dentistry is it's kind of, I wouldn't say sedentary. I use a microscope, but not a lot of moving around. So my left hand, that's the one that holds the mirror. It kind of stays in the same position all day. So I had what they actually call golfer's elbow in my left elbow, even though I don't play golf. It was medial epicondylitis,
Yeah.
6 years of pain. And I ended up having surgery on it, which did nothing. So I had chronic pain. And then my left thumb, from gripping that little tiny mirror, it turned in what they call a trigger finger. The tendon was swollen. It would get locked straight. I'd have to struggle to bend it. Then it would get locked bent, and, it would snap. And that was about 5 years of pain, and nothing was working. I think I had some cortisone injections. So I had heard about the miracles of this carnivore diet, and we can get into that a little bit later if you want, since this is the Carnivore Cast. And I went on it, and within 3 weeks, my medial epicondylitis went away.
Wow.
Now I thought, well, maybe it's a fluke. And I work out pretty much on a daily basis. So I was started to push my workouts, and it has never bothered me since. My body comp improved. My muscle mass went up. Not that I'm a huge guy, but more muscle, less body fat, more clarity, better sleep, better concentration. I can't say anything bad about it. So there's my carnivore story.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask how old you are, Scott?
This episode is brought to you by Optimal Carnivore. Many people I talk to struggle to get enough organ meat on a carnivore diet. There's debate about whether you need to eat organs or not, but I like to supplement with organ meats, and it makes me feel better, and many carnivores would agree. Optimal Carnivore was created by carnivores for carnivores. In fact, I was consulted during the formulation, which is pretty cool. They have a unique organ complex that combines 9 different organs: liver, brain, heart, and more, all from grass-fed, grass-finished animals in New Zealand. And taking 6 capsules a day is the same as eating an ounce of raw liver. And it's completely freeze-dried, and they use a very high-quality process to retain all the nutrients. You can use the link in the episode description or the link in my Instagram bio, and use the code Carnivore10 to save at checkout and support the show. Thank you.
I am 60.
Okay. Yeah, you don't look it in your photos. You look very full of life.
Thank you.
Art Devaney reminds me.
Yeah, right. He was one of my early heroes. Yeah, when I first got into this. Yeah,
he's awesome.
So I'm here on vacation, and the house, it's really a lively house. My wife has a very large family. Everybody's got kids. They're all in their 20s, most of them. So you can imagine the vibrancy that's in this house. And, we're on the beach all day playing games. Spike, we were just playing for hours, and, they have to rest more than I do.
That's pretty remarkable. And can you talk about how you started to incorporate it with your patients and maybe some of the results you've seen with them?
Yeah. So, So, it's kind of a slow process. First of all, I'm in a large multi-specialty practice. So there are other general dentists doing the mainstream thing and all the specialists. And when I started talking this talk, they looked at me like I had 2 heads. And I think they were nervous. They were nervous that I was off in my little room, doing some kind of, woo-woo, voodoo stuff on patients. And, so having it being a large practice, sometimes we see each other's patients where, let's say, one of my partners isn't there. Patient thinks they chipped the filling. I'd see them. Well, that was the perfect patient to practice a delivery on, wasn't it? How to introduce maybe better eating, putting things together in an understandable way for patients. So the patients would go back to their dentist of record and say, hey, this guy was talking weird stuff about, eating natural whole foods. And then my partners would come to me all alarmed, thinking I was overstepping my bounds. But I mean, this is ridiculous. Of course, tooth decay did not start in, well, really in any species. We're the only species who really gets tooth decay, other than the animals that we feed our lousy man-made food to. And it didn't start until we started farming. So it's absolutely appropriate to pin tooth decay and other health problems on diet. This is absolutely part of our job. But, the other realization that I've had over the years is that to call ourselves dentists is really limiting, because of course we treat patients, and the mouth is part of the body, and what goes wrong in the mouth absolutely has systemic ramifications. I do a lot of what we call airway dentistry, and it's due to the fact that most of us have jaws that are smaller than they're supposed to be, and it causes all sorts of problems. So I've had a lot of resistance from my partners, but not lately, because these concepts now are being spoken about at conferences, and there's articles and journals, and all of a sudden, the guy who's been talking voodoo stuff for 15 years is sort of the go-to guy now for a lot of my partners for a lot of these problems that patients have.
That's incredible. That's really great to hear and cool to see. And I'm really curious because, there's obviously, as soon as I think the carnivore and paleo communities are guilty of this too. As soon as they demonize something or deem something to be more favorable, companies attack the space with coming out with products and labels.
Yeah.
I feel like toothpaste is one of those areas. Like, what are some things that we should be looking for in toothpaste and like taking care of our teeth that's actually important from your perspective? Like, is avoiding fluoride actually a good idea? Things like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So toothpaste is completely unnecessary, believe it or not. So I don't get too excited over the whole subject of toothpaste. It's really unnecessary. Okay. What really, makes a healthy mouth is just putting healthy things in it. And the biggest offender for tooth decay, really, and gum disease as well, it's what I would call dense acellular carbohydrates, otherwise known as processed carbs of any variety. I mean, when you look at, let's say, Egyptian mummies, they have terrible teeth. I mean, there are how many millions of mummies I think they can drag out at any moment, take MRIs and CAT scans and do all sorts of exams on them. And they're riddled with heart disease. They have terrible teeth, and they weren't farming sugar. They didn't have sugar beets. It was grains. So you don't just need sugar. It can be any dense acellular carbohydrate. I would dare say that things like pretzels, that really, after a minute, they're stuck to your teeth. They have no flavor, so you're not really salivating them away, but they could be there for hours. The bacteria in the mouth are fermenting the carbohydrates and creating an acidic environment. The acid melts the minerals out of the teeth. So that's actually what a cavity is. So not putting that stuff in the mouth, of course, is one way to avoid tooth decay, but that's hard for most average folks. So that's why brushing is a really good idea. The toothpaste is there more for mouthfeel and taste, and maybe when you have that minty clean sensation, it feels like your mouth is cleaner.
Yeah.
But just
Hardest
brushing it
thing the
away
toothpaste companies
is,
ever made.
and because it can hide in between the teeth, flossing once a day is a really good idea as well. But if you like toothpaste, you can make your own. I have, I think, 2 recipes on my website. MCT oil. You can buy basically calcium carbonate, which is like dissolved shells, medical grade, and sort of mix those up. If you want to put a couple of organic drops of mint in there you go. And you can make your own.
And do you think that's really helpful and interesting? What do you think about calcium for dental health? Like, do you think a lot of people criticize paleo and carnivore and keto diets for being low in calcium?
Yeah. So, I mean, I eat dairy products. I'm lactose intolerant, but I do well with cheese and cottage cheese. So, of course, that's not really a big concern for me personally. But yeah, I think calcium can be a little hard to come by if you're not careful. One of the things that I will always do, if I don't eat a lot of poultry, but if I do, I'm nibbling on the bones. I'm eating, the crunchy ends of the bones there, for my calcium. And then, the little tiny like anchovies and sardines and stuff like that. I think they have bones in them too. So I'll go out of my way to eat stuff like that. Especially my nephews and all their friends that come out to visit us at this house were intrigued with this carnivore thing. And at that point, I was on a kick where I was basically drinking 12 egg yolks for breakfast. Not the egg, just taking the egg yolks, mixing a little water, maybe a little honey, mixing it up and gulping it down. 900 calories of really nutrient dense food. And then last year I brought a bunch of liver that I'd have for breakfast, a calf's liver, nice big 8-ounce slice. This year I didn't do that. I maybe had a little cottage cheese today, and I think I had another piece of cheese. Still, high quality food, but not as nutrient dense as I had been in previous years. And what's interesting is this year, the top of my feet are a little burnt. I have less tolerance for the sun this year. I'm unable to handle the sun as much this year and I think part of it is just because I am going, hours and hours maybe without eating enough. Perhaps I'm not eating enough. I'm not. Maybe I need a little more nutrients. So it hasn't been a game changer fasting for me.
Yeah,
personally. I understand the concept and all the benefits. I haven't seen much of it though, personally.
Okay. And how about organs? It sounds like you do like.
Oh yeah. I big and always have been. My mom grew up on a cattle ranch in Oklahoma, so kidneys and liver were a pretty regular thing growing up. And then my dad can catch a fish in the Sahara Desert in the middle of the summer. He's an unbelievable fisherman. Grew up on Long Island, so we mainly had seafood and shellfish, raw clams, raw oysters, that sort of thing. And you're talking some of the most nutrient dense foods there, as well as I believe with the organ meat. So it actually took this vacation year to realize that I feel like I have a little less energy than last year and definitely less tolerance for the sun. So I'm going to definitely go back to my liver and egg yolk phase and probably eat a little bit more regularly.
And what do you see as kind of like the future of dentistry? You mentioned some of these things are becoming more common knowledge, or at least being shared at more conferences and in more sources. What do you think the next 10 years will look like?
Yeah, so interestingly, next Friday, I'll be out in UCLA at the Ancestral Health Symposium, and we have a nice panel this year. James Nestor, the author who wrote Breath. Are you familiar with that book at all?
What's the name of it?
Breath.
No, I haven't
James
read
Nestor.
it. No,
Yeah, so he's a hero for dentists who think like me. I'm certainly not the only one. He had some problems with apnea and snoring and so forth, and turns out that dentists had a lot to say about it, a lot to do with that stuff. So he's moderating a panel. Do you know Robert Lustig?
Yeah.
A pediatric endocrinologist. So he's famous for Sugar, the Bitter Truth.
Yes.
So he's going to be on the panel kind of talking about fetal development, especially the jaws and so forth. And then Kevin Boyd, who's a pediatric dentist who specializes in airway, pediatric airway. I mean, little babies already have obstructive sleep apnea. Wow. Our jaws are that bad. And then Michael Mew, Dr. Michael Mew, he's also he's English. He's British. His father pioneered this type of orthodontics called orthotropics. And he was one of the first ones to talk about chewing hard foods and having a natural diet, and that will develop a much larger set of jaws. So, we're meant to be, hunting and gathering, and the food was much more coarse. So when bones, when you put forces on bones, it stimulates them to grow. One of my professors, Dr. Melvin Moss at Columbia University, was instrumental in putting this whole thing together. He has what he actually is not happy. He calls it the functional matrix theory. And the development of the facial bones is not just genetic. It really has to do with the forces of chewing and swallowing and all that sort of stuff. So dentists have kind of taken that concept and put an evolutionary spin on it. And, there's tons of evidence out there, lots of studies, modern studies even, that people with more coarse diets have larger jaws and, can breathe better. So they're less prone to having sleep apnea. So this is the big thing right now, as far as I'm concerned, with dentistry. And so, again, I'm not the only one. There are other dentists who are thinking this way. And it's important to develop teams of specialists, ear, nose, and throats. People, there's a thing called myofunctional therapy. It's literally like physical therapy for the tongue, lips, cheeks, etc. Because a lot of us never develop a proper swallow, believe it or not, tongue posture because of these small jaws. Other things like tongue ties. So there's this field, myofunctional therapy, and we do tongue releases and frenum releases, things like that, to help get the tongue where it needs to be. All sorts of specialists. So we're trying to develop, regional networks where we're all, there's crosstalk. We all share patients. If somebody comes to me and their jaws are too small and they're snoring, that's a pretty sure sign. If they don't have apnea, it may very well turn into it soon. But is that their only problem? It could be that they have enlarged tonsils. So we look for these things. I can't see adenoids, but so we would have to refer to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. I refer dozens of patients out on a routine basis to sleep doctors to see what's happening there. The solution isn't always dentistry, although it can be. We could make appliances that people wear at night to advance their jaws, to allow their tongue to move out of their throat and so they can get some air. But then there are CPAP machines. There are orthodontics. We can move teeth. That's actually what I'm doing now. I have mild apnea. My wife, who's 100 pounds, has mild apnea. My brother has moderate apnea. My father has. It's really rampant. Talk about a pandemic happening literally right under our nose. No pun intended. So now we're recognizing these things, and I've had orthodontics a few times. And when I showed my casts to an orthodontist, they thought it was perfect. I said, no. The distance between my upper molars is actually not bad for a modern human at 37 millimeters. It's called the intermolar distance. But when we look at pre-industrial skulls or even just ancient skulls, it was 40 to 45 millimeters across. So the tongue had a lot more room to occupy the mouth.
Right.
Our faces, when you look at our profiles, under the nose are pushed back several millimeters. So that brings the tongue into the back of the throat. So the front of the face, or I should say the back of the face, is the front of the airway. When we sleep, REM sleep, our brains are actually more active than when we're awake sometimes. And the body actually gets paralyzed. And so the tongue can easily sink into the throat. So the sleep group that I use, Dr. O'Brien runs that group. He actually says that all snoring will turn into apnea, believe it or not. So no amount of snoring is actually normal, especially when you see children. So in terms of the future, putting this whole thing together, hopefully building networks of different specialties, ear, nose, and throats, allergists, etc. We can potentially get the word out that we need to be eating real whole foods, just as a matter of course, from, let's say 1 year of age.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I have a lot of interest in the sleep apnea space too, just because I have not great sleeping. I've actually had sleep studies done. And I don't have formal diagnosis for apnea, but I am always trying to find ways to improve my breathing at night.
Oh yeah, so you would definitely be interested in reading James Nestor's book, Breath.
Yeah.
It's really a nice compendium of everything that you could be looking into, I think.
Awesome. I'll check that out. Well, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time, Dr. Scott. It's been fantastic to learn more about you and hear about some of the ways you're incorporating paleo and carnivore into your dentistry practice. Where can people find out more about you? And I'll have links to everything in the show notes.
Yeah, I have a website. It's just drscottsolomons.com. So it's DRSCOTTSOLOMONS.com. And I usually post a weekly blog. Sometimes it's on a dental type subject. Otherwise, it could be on any kind of general health topic. Always taking that evolutionary medicine, paleo, carnivore type approach, more of a what patients can do for themselves type of approach, rather than, here's a great operation that they've pioneered and a lovely new medication. That's really not what I talk about so much.
Got it. Okay, well, I'll have links to that and really appreciate your time today, Dr. Scott.
Thanks, Scott. It's been a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out, and share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.